And we are live.
What is going on, Giants Nation? Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Happy Thanksgiving to you, Chris. Nick Filato of Big Blue View here, joined by Chris Flum to give our rapid reactions on the Giants' 28-20 loss over the Dallas Cowboys here Thursday, Thanksgiving football. Look, Chris, there's a lot of directions we can take it in. I'm not 100% certain where you want to start, but it's upsetting because the Giants, who are incredibly injured at this point, right? You're talking about the secondary, the offensive line had 3 new starters on it. They were really competitive in the first half and kind of gave us this impression that, wow, this Giants team might be able to pull off this upset, but they absolutely collapsed in the second half. It seemed like the injuries were a little bit too much to overcome. Some very, very controversial calls went Dallas's direction. And then by the end of the half, we were just saying, didn't seem like the Giants had a chance despite the nice start to begin the game.
Yeah, I think that really is where we have to start. This was a tale of two halves. The first half went absolutely according to script for the Giants' victories this year, especially their victories over teams they probably shouldn't have beaten, where the Giants played disciplined football, they played within themselves, and they let the other team beat themselves. Yeah, Dallas was playing hyper aggressive football to start the game. They were airing it out, testing the Giants downfield. They went for it on a 4th and 2 from their own 40-yard line. I mean, okay, maybe the 4th down decision bot says that's a toss-up, but woof, I wouldn't have taken that bet. Yeah, I don't think Dallas really respected the Giants' offense in this game. And it really cost them in the first half. The Giants went into halftime with the lead. And then second half, Dallas continued to play sloppy, but they also played a much more methodical brand of football. And ultimately they were able to get back over get their skis back under them.
And I thought the start of the game was interesting too, Chris, because the Giants came out and all week we discussed, and it made sense that it was just going to be the Saquon Barkley show. But Mike Kafka and Brian Dable deviated from that, and they went with a more pass-heavy attack for Daniel Jones. And it looked like the Giants were able to, I would say, at least in the beginning of the game, they were moving the football with a few nice chunk gains, and they were able to slow down that pass rush of Dallas. I mean, Dallas only ended up finishing with 3 sacks, 2 in the second half against Andrew Thomas by Micah Parsons. But throughout the game, even though the Giants had this nice pass-happy type of attack, I felt like Daniel Jones was a little off target on really key critical situations, like the 3rd down to Richie James. Then there was another play to Richie James. Richie James made a fantastic catch on a football that was poorly placed to the outside. And then the egregious 4th and 1 or 4th and 2, whatever it was, where Daniel Jones put it behind Saquon Barkley, and the Giants only had 10 players on the field. So what the heck happened with that play?
I don't know. Like I said, tale of two halves. The Giants just kind of collapsed in the fourth half, or in the second half, in the fourth quarter, particularly. It was almost inexplicable the way their mental mistakes started to snowball on them. It was like they got to the second half and then didn't know what to do from there. They know how to play from like a 4-point deficit, but they didn't seem to know how to play from a 6-point lead.
No, and that's where it got upsetting too, because the Giants went into halftime, score 13-7. Giants are up. We have all the momentum at this point. And then Dallas received the football and went on a 14-play, 75-yard drive. And now this is the second week in the row, Chris, that we've seen this. A team come out of halftime, and last week the Lions double dipped, which was one reason why the team just got into an incredible hole. But Dallas drives down the field. They score the touchdown. And I'll say this, a couple of those Darnay Holmes penalties were really, really suspect. And what made me most angry about it was Kayvon Thibodeau was blatantly held on the 1/3 and 7 pass that I think went to CeeDee Lamb, and that was neglected to be called. But still, 14 plays, you still had other chances for the New York Giants defense to come up with stops, and they didn't. And then you have 2 sets of downs on the offense where they just turned the football over on downs. They went 6 plays, 20 yards, 4th and 1. Daniel Jones puts it behind Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley does not catch it, turnover on downs. And then what does Dallas do with their next 2 offensive possessions? 14 points. They score 2 straight touchdowns. And at that point of the game, what are you going to do? The New York Giants turn the football over after 11-play, 38-yard drive on downs, that is. But you're out of the game at that point, essentially, because there's like 8:58 something left in the game, and it's 28-13.
Yes, and it really could have been worse if Dallas hadn't missed that final field goal attempt. You know, we have a question here is like, why are the Giants so Jekyll and Hyde from play calling standpoint, and what's with the time management at the end of the second half? And those are things we both wanted to talk about. So why don't we take those in order? Go ahead. Like, what the Giants play calling?
The Giants play calling, we'll be able to give better analysis on that once we see the all-22, see exactly what Dallas was doing with their safeties and with their defensive front. And I actually thought there were some really well schemed up plays by Mike Kafka. Now, the 10 guys on the field, that's inexcusable. I don't know if that's on Mike Kafka or if it's on somebody else, but that's a very nice play design that got Saquon Barkley free with leverage on Leighton Vander Esch. Could have realistically went for a touchdown if Daniel Jones put that where the football should have been. Unfortunately, it did not. But I'm going to wait. I'm going to reserve my judgment a little bit with the play calling. I think it's a little bit difficult to blame Mike Kafka because he has a whole new group of wide receivers that he's working with every single week with all these injuries and 3 different offensive linemen. So we'll wait to see the all-22. But in terms of the tempo, I'm not really 100% certain, Chris, what's going on with that, because it was at the end of the first half and at the end of the game. I'm sitting there like, what the hell are the New York Giants doing from a tempo standpoint?
Yeah, like just my own take first blush on this is the Giants offense as it has been all year long. They have a pretty limited selection of plays, and they have some plays they execute well. The difference, I think, is that the Giants were winning in the first half of the season. So the feeling about those plays is, obviously much better, much more positive. The last couple games, those plays haven't been working. I think the NFL as a whole has gotten tape on the Giants offense, and they're now starting to recognize what happens, when and where the Giants like to run those play action boot, how they like to layer their receivers, when they like to get the ball to the tight end on those crossing routes off of play action. And then as for the tempo, honestly, I think that just might be how fast the Giants are able to play. Like, they have really struggled to play with urgency all year long. Like, this is something I've kind of noticed in other games where it's like, come on guys, get the ball snapped. Let's go. Move a little bit faster, please. Clock's moving here. And I think they play a methodical offense because that is the offense they are able to play. Like, the Giants have had an incredible start to the season, but they have a very limited team, and they were limited in a lot of positions even before they were, I'm going to say, almost literally decimated by injuries. Not actually decimated, because actual decimations involve people literally being killed. The Giants didn't have anybody getting killed, but they did lose more than a tenth of their active roster to injuries last week. So yeah, they kind of are what they are right now.
They are what they are, and it says something. It speaks volumes of this team, right? That after Cordell Flott, a 3rd-round rookie out of LSU, gets injured and suffers that concussion, that the Giants really started falling apart on the back end. And I think we should talk maybe a little bit about Wink Martindale, because Wink will wink, and we love that. And Giants were getting some solid pressure and some hits on Dak Prescott in that first half. Kayvon Thibodeau, to me, had his best game as a New York Giant. But the constant putting Darnay Holmes in a one-on-one situation against CeeDee Lamb in the slot with no help just proved to be the Achilles heel of this Giants defense. And I get you're going to do your thing, but you need to change it up a little bit at that point. And I felt like it got exposed. And I know he's not working with a lot. He's working with maybe some guys he found on DoorDash, if you know what I'm talking about. But I think you do need to change some things up on the back end, because all game the Giants were getting toasted on those deep over routes. And I felt like Darnay Holmes was put into a really disadvantageous situation time and time again against a superior player.
Yeah, the Darnay Holmes against CeeDee Lamb is a matchup you take every time if you're the Cowboys, and that's a matchup Dallas took just about every single time. And I don't want to blame Darnay Holmes too much, because that is a very tough matchup. And once Cordell Flott went down, I'm really not sure what the Giants were supposed to do. You don't want them to change their scheme, to go outside of their DNA too much on the fly. But We saw it with Baltimore last year. Wink's defense is one that needs guys on the back end. He cannot get along with just Jags. If he's forced to scrape the bottom of his depth chart, he's Wink gonna wink, like you said. And if you run too many of those blitzes with guys who are special teams players, that's kind of what is going to happen.
But we've seen him change his scheme. That's the thing. We have a quote from or a comment from Paul Gillen. Wink doesn't change his scheme despite injuries or different players. I think he has a point there, but I also do think he changes scheme depending on the opponent he's going up against. Like, let's go back to week 7 against Jacksonville. Didn't really blitz at all that entire game. He was very, very passive. He was dropping 8 into coverage because I think that was a part of his game plan. But I think his game plan in this game and his game plan against Jared Goff was get pressure, get after them, and then dictate to them. And then once that didn't work, he didn't deviate that much, at least especially not this week, maybe a little bit last week. But the Lions weren't really throwing the football down the stretch of the game because they had such an insurmountable lead, it seemed like, over the New York Giants. But yeah, I would like to see some more adjustments. It's easy to say that sitting in this chair, but we know the Giants don't have the personnel to guard the CD Lambs of the world. Now, if they had a Dory Jackson, I'm pretty sure Wink Martindale would have been like 22. You guard 88 and you're not leaving him. You're going to follow him into the slot and we're going to make 13 Michael Gallup and Noah Brown 85 beat us. And you know what? The Dallas Cowboys might have still beat the New York Giants, but Giants would have had a much better opportunity and chance to win. But instead, not to put a lot on the coaching staff here, but let's do it. They had to use Adoree Jackson as a punt returner, which we're probably going to slam for the foreseeable future because I still think it's one of the dumbest things. It is the dumbest thing this coaching staff has done so far.
Yeah, I agree, but it would also hurt if Adoree was out there, if he had never returned a punt, was out there and just got his legs tangled up on a coverage rep and got hurt as well. So I'm not going to damn them too much for it. It's definitely a more dangerous play than your average coverage rep on defense. But like you said, it is what it is right now. They've got the guys they've got. They'll get Jackson back eventually, hopefully before January. But right now I'm actually a little bit thankful the Giants have the mini bye to hopefully get Cordell Flott, who's ruled out with a concussion. Hopefully he will be able to get back before their next game, because if they have to go with a starting secondary of Nick McLeod and Rodarius Williams, that starts to get, that I think you might start to see a repeat performance.
I want to tip my cap to Rodarius Williams, who did have that one PBU and he came away with the interception. And it's pretty cool. He's essentially a rookie after missing most of his rookie season with the torn ACL. And Chris, we got a comment from, it looks like SMTH Crazy. If you want to put that up on the screen for the YouTube audience, but for those on the podcast, says, born, raised in New York, live in Dallas. As neutral as I can be on this, Giants are overachieving with injuries. Also, in my opinion, do you guys think coordinator coaching needs changing, and where? Anyone need to go? I don't. I still love these coordinators. Look, we're going to chastise them when they lose, and when they win, we're going to applaud them for the adjustments that they make in game and everything that they've done up to this point. Like, you're right. Giants are overachieving, Smith Crazy, right? I think one reason why they're overachieving is because of Mike Kafka and because of Wink Martindale. So I would not advocate for any of those guys to be let go. No.
Yeah, no, I said it after the Giants beat Green Bay, after they beat Baltimore. I honestly believe there is an argument that they have the best coaching staff in the NFL, and I still believe that. They are playing with a very, very limited roster at this point. They opened the season with a limited roster, and they have had some serious attrition over the last few weeks. I think the coaching staff is kind of doing everything they can right now. Wink, he is from the Ryan coaching tree. Buddy Ryan, Rex Ryan, those guys are going to be aggressive. They're going to run exotic blitzes. And when they get backed into a corner, they swing that much harder. That is who they are. He comes from the coaching tree that punched Kevin Gilbride in the face for throwing the ball too much. That is just who he is. And I if I'm going to love him for it when it's going well, yeah, I'm not going to damn him for it when he's forced to field special teams players, you know, fourth, fifth string players as starters against one of the best offenses in the NFL. I absolutely understand the frustration, but we also do need to be realistic about who the Giants are. Yeah, they really have been punching well above their weight class this year, and they got off to a fantastic start to the season. As far as I'm concerned, they have proven everything they need to this year. And now they're facing really the toughest home stretch of any team in the NFL. So, what's going to happen is going to happen. I think coaching wise, they are in a great position going forward.
And as Joe Shane can draft and find the free agents that this front office wants to bring in, this roster is inevitably going to improve. And I say that with the caveat of we don't know who the quarterback is going to be. We don't know if Saquon Barkley is going to be back. So we'll have to kind of wait and see. We also have a comment from Joshua Ellison. It's simple, 10 days to get ready for Washington, get it done. I agree. Washington has a matchup against Atlanta on Sunday. As Chris pointed out, Giants need to go back into this bye week, get healthy, come up with a game plan, and play this Washington team that is playing much better football than they were playing at the beginning of the season. Also got a comment from Chris D. They're not letting Daniel Jones run anymore. Anyone notice that? Yeah, we have noticed that. Daniel Jones had 3 carries for 14 yards. I don't believe there were any designed rushes that weren't zone reads. And I think one product of that, Chris, is defenses aren't allowing it. I think earlier in the season, we were seeing those backside pursuit defenders, specifically against the Bears and the Packers, not respect Daniel Jones. So Daniel Jones would just pick up the yards with his legs. Now all those teams, those backside pursuit defenders are just staying put. So that's one reason why, but I still think a big reason why the Giants had a lot of offensive success earlier wasn't even just the zone read game. It was the play action boot game, which the defense also is accounting for. But we're not seeing nearly as much Daniel Jones on the ground. And I think in order for the Giants to really be effective on offense right now with the lack of explosive plays, which they actually had one against with Darius Slayton on that 44-yard game, but I think one way they need to still move the football is to incorporate Daniel Jones's legs, or at least the threat of them. And that's not something maybe we're seeing as much as we did maybe like 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Yeah, I really think increased defensive discipline, like the book is kind of being written. The tape is out there on the Giants offense at this point. They've had 11 games for opposing defenses to study. So they more or less know what the Giants do, what they don't do, what they can do, what they can't do. And we said it after last week. Discipline is kind of the Giants' kryptonite right now. The first half, Dallas was being incredibly undisciplined. They were really undisciplined all game. I mean, they had 13 penalties, even with some not getting called. That is incredible.
A lot of them were like weird, like false starts too, like just totally undisciplined things that should not be happening at home.
Yeah, I mean, a home team the home team is not supposed to be having pre-snap penalties in a loud stadium. That's supposed to be for the road team, and the Giants really weren't getting those. So,
we're also.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No,
yeah,
go ahead,
I was just going to say, we're getting a lot of questions in the comments right now from Paul and Joshua about Saquon Barkley and his health, his durability. He doesn't look as explosive as he used to. And I can actually see that too. I don't think he looks as explosive as we saw in the beginning of the season, but I also don't think that's necessarily a novel thing just because he's been such a focal point of this offense. And we're several weeks into the season now. And I do appreciate how this coaching staff, the last 2 weeks when the Giants were losing, they take Saquon Barkley out. They're not going to put him out there or trot him out there and put him in harm's way. They were using Gary Brightwell. They're using Matt Breida on some of those Gary Brightwell runs that you're referring to, Paul, because he said Gary Brightwell looked better than he did today. I will say that Brightwell had a really nice cut, but those holes were a lot bigger than the ones that Saquon Barkley had. So I think that's one reason why. But I am a little bit worried about Saquon Barkley's effectiveness and explosiveness down the stretch of the season, because it's been a couple weeks now where we really haven't seen it. Even against Houston, it wasn't necessarily crazy explosive plays that we saw in the beginning of the year, right? It was more just like 6, 7, 8 yards because Houston's just a terrible defense, and they're going to give this guy the football 36 times. I mean, 35 carries in a game is just insane.
Yeah, it really is. I think, again, part of it is increased defensive discipline, where defenses just have guys rallying to Barkley. but also he has been running a lot more physical than he had previously in his career. And he
Mhm.
was heading headlong. He was sprinting towards like well over 400 touches. And I I do think the Giants might have run him down just a little bit, maybe a little bit overused him in the first half. And I also do kind of want to talk about Gary Brightwell and also Matt Breida this game, because one thing we did point out as a potential option for the Giants to deal with their injuries was their pony package, that 21 personnel package, and they made good use of that. I thought part of the reason for those just massive alleys for Gary Brightwell was because the Giants used Saquon Barkley as a decoy. Dallas keyed on him, and Brightwell was able to use his vision and explode upfield.
Yeah. Chris, Paul just actually brought that up too. Holes are bigger because all of the eyes are typically on Saquon. Maybe run more running backs. On that one play that everyone's referencing with Brightwell, they had Barkley as a wing back there, and they motioned him around. We'll see on the film if that really drew the eyes of Jabril Cox and Leighton Vander Esch and the linebackers, but it's plausible that it did. Kelly also asked, do you think that 4th and 1 throw was on Daniel Jones? Look, I think Saquon Barkley still needs to catch it, but yes, ultimately that's on the quarterback. You hit him in stride, you're talking about a possible touchdown with an athlete like Saquon Barkley. You put it to his back hip, forcing Saquon Barkley, who's running laterally, to adjust behind him to make the catch. It's tough on Saquon Barkley. He still needs to catch it, but ultimately I would put the blame on Daniel Jones if there is one person to blame.
Same. That is a very difficult catch to make. Running across the field, you put the ball low and behind him, and it looked like the ball might have come out a little bit sooner than Barkley was expecting.
Pressure.
Yeah, that is really, that's a throw Jones has to make. Yeah, and that was kind of a throw he struggled to make all season. Like we mentioned earlier in the stream, sorry, not all season, all game. As we mentioned earlier in the stream, Daniel Jones was kind of erratic this game. He was throwing kind of outside of guys' catch radiuses, especially on those throws outside the numbers to the flats there. Yeah, I'm not sure if it was the effect of pressure, if Dallas was forcing him to move and that was interfering with his mechanics. That's something I think we're definitely going to have to take a look at on the All-22.
Absolutely. And I think and we brought this up at the beginning of the stream too, but let's really put it into context here, because the Giants, they love to run on second down. Like they're running on second and long, which is very Jason Garrett of them, I think. But right. That's one thing I will say that I'm not a huge fan of, but I think there are a lot of reasons for it, as we brought up the offensive line, the protection, and obviously let me turn off the ESPN thing, and obviously the injuries to the wide receivers. But
ESPN just loves to get free advertising on our stream.
Oh, I absolutely hate it. Like, dude, just take it off. We all use your platform. It's a good interface to use to look at stats, but I don't want these ads just being blaring all the time, all over, whatever. But 3rd and 4, Daniel Jones misses Richie James in the flat. That came after that first interception at Dak Prescott. Like, you really want to make an impression on this game. You're up 3-0. You can't go 3 and out there. The Giants came out with 2 straight runs to get into a 3rd and 4 situation. Daniel Jones had a pitching catch to Richie James and just put it out of reach. And those are the types of throws where you're like, man, you got to hit that. That is a got to have it moment. Daniel Jones has been phenomenal this season in got to have it type of moments. But right there, I mean, you go 3 and out after your defense forces an interception with all the injuries they have on the back end. What happens next drive? Dallas goes 11 plays, 93 yards, punches it into the end zone. So like little plays like that can come back to bite you in the rear end.
Yeah, absolutely. When you have a margin of error as small as the Giants do, they just don't have the horsepower that a lot of other offenses in the NFL do. They didn't have the horsepower at the beginning of the season when they still had Kadarius Toney and they still had, Wan'Dale Robinson healthy and Sterling Shepard healthy. Now their margins for error are beyond razor thin. It's like hair width thin. So if the opportunities are there, they absolutely positively have to take advantage of them. That's just the only thing.
And that's what's so upsetting too, man, because the Giants had a touchdown nullified, a 24-yard touchdown to Isaiah Hodgins, where they take a stupid ineligible man downfield penalty. And look, he was 3 yards downfield. That's against the rule. Now, that's not the reason for the rule, but still, like Tyree Phillips, just don't drift that far downfield. I swear to God, man, the Giants get called for that a lot. One reason is because they run a lot of RPOs and stuff like that, where the offensive line doesn't know if they should climb up to the second level. Daniel Jones holds on to the football second too late. That's what happened to them last week against Detroit. But this wasn't an RPO. This was, I believe, like a play action pass where Hodgins was open. That was a well-designed play there, and just one little mistake by an offensive lineman just getting a little bit too aggressive following DeMarcus Lawrence downfield led to 6 points getting removed from the board.
Yeah, it did. And this really was a sloppy game from both teams. Dallas was sloppy all game long. The Giants they had some ugly series in the first half. They got very sloppy as things kind of snowballed on them in the second half. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's just an artifact of it being Thursday night football. Both teams only had like really 3 days to get ready for it. Yeah, I personally am not fond of Thursday games just because teams have such little time to get ready. I just prefer watching games where they've had a normal week to prepare. Just as a fan of football and somebody who likes to watch good football be played well. But yeah, there were times where this game was just kind of painful to watch from that perspective.
Yeah, it wasn't pretty. But Chris, do you have anything else on this game, this 28-20 victory for the Dallas Cowboys over our beloved New York Giants, where Dallas had 430 total yards and the Giants had 300?
Yeah. I'm really going to focus in on that all 22 tape when we do eventually get it, because there are some questions I have that I think that will really provide the answer to. And I'm really interested to get a good look at Kayvon Thibodeau from both angles, because I thought he had a very good game himself. Like you said, maybe his best game as a pro. And I also want to get a better look at some of the coverages the Giants called, because TV angle being what it is, especially after the ball snapped, you're not quite sure exactly what's going on down there.
To me, it looked like there was a lot of cover zero in this game, which would not surprise me. Last week, I think they ran cover zero, the Giants, like 26% of the time against the Lions. And you wouldn't really think so because Jared Goff didn't get sacked, I don't think, once. Like Jared Goff was just getting the football out of his hands very quickly. And Dak Prescott, it looked like he struggled with those pressures early in the game, but in the second half, man, it wasn't even phasing him, it looked like. So it's unfortunate, but the New York Giants, they'll look to regroup and bounce back against another NFC East opponent, their first matchup against the Washington Commanders next week. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the Chris and Nick Show here on Big Blue View Radio. Please head on over to bigblueview.com, where we have all of our written content covering the New York Giants extensively. Thank you, everybody, and have a lovely day.
Yes. Oh, and before we get out of here, Joshua, I will get to that, but in our next podcast. Good night, everybody.